I asked the community what they want to see next in terms of which playstyle they want me to cover, and it was an overwhelming, response that they wanted to see tank. So we're going to talk about the tank playstyle today. All right. Now, what is tank? Quite simply, as the name suggests, they play very, very, very tanky. That is basically why it's called the tank playstyle. And why should you play tank? Let's talk about it, okay? When you're playing as a tank playstyle, the main reason you want to play it, okay, is because it is so safe. All right? This playstyle is generally so safe that unless you suck, you can't lose. Okay? And it is also one of the main reasons why everyone goes into tank mode at the end of an RTA season, because it is something that helps, protect your win-loss ratio, especially when you're climbing the ladder in the leaderboard during the last day. People don't want to lose. Okay? And so typically when you play as a tank player, and what you'll normally see as tank players, right? I'm going to just put it down here. You will have a very good win-loss ratio. Yeah? Usually as a tank player, because when you play as a tank, your win-loss ratio, it is skewed towards winning most of the time because you are drafting so safe in the draft that, you try to mitigate as much RNG as you can. Opposite to that, we have Cleave and Aggro who, will, have a relatively lower win-loss ratio because they play very aggressive and therefore they are taking more chances. You don't want to take chances. You want to win. That is the entire point of playing tank. All right? And so because of that, all right, normally this is what I advise players. If you have heart problems and if you hate playing RTA because you cannot stand losing, play tank. Your dreams of, hitting mythic or hitting platinum is no longer a pipe dream. All right? But you have to also remember that as a tank player, okay, you are going to be, quite hated in a sense because you're going to be sitting there trying to play for as long as possible. So you're going to have long drawn out matches. Okay? That is the entire point of playing tank. You're not trying to play to, play every 2 minutes. You're going to sit there, you're going to play for 5 minutes. You're going to play for 7 minutes, maybe even 10 minutes. Okay? But that trade-off means you win. Okay? And that's how tank players want to play. They want to play so safe that losing is, sometimes borderline impossible. All right? But the trade-off is they will play a game for a relatively longer time compared to, let's say if you were playing aggro or cleave. Okay? So, why should you play tank? I already reiterated. Unless you have, you are this kind of player that you really don't want to play RTA because you don't like losing, tank is for you. Okay? Now, let's talk about the pros and cons real quickly about, what tank players are like. All right? Pro and cons. Okay? Now, as a tank player, all right, the pro is, like I mentioned earlier, it is very, very safe. All right? It's very, very safe to play. I don't have to go on too much about this anymore because I already just talked about it earlier. But this is one of the pros of playing tank. All right? Number 2, you just need good supporters, and a few DPS built. What do I mean by that? Because you are playing the tank game, you are trying to draft very safe. So you value supporters more than you value your DPS. Which means that, because you're playing such a long game, you're going to go into, what, in E7 we used to call frenzy. Alright? And in frenzy, your healing efficacy and your damage starts improving. Your healing drops, your damage gets boosted. So eventually at the end of everything, your supporters are going to start hitting like a truck, right? And because of that, you know that your supporters are already built super bulky, right? Because they need to survive waves of, barrages. You just, really abuse the fact that you are going to eventually do damage with them. Okay, so that is one of the, main characteristics of playing a tank player. You don't really need a lot of DPS. You just need DPSs to, help facilitate answering certain problems in the draft. Alright? The third thing about playing tank, okay, and this is probably something you guys are gonna, enjoy a little bit more, is that playing as a tank, it is extremely annoying to cleave. Okay, why is it annoying to cleave? Because when you're playing as a tank player, your draft is so neutral at the beginning that the cleave player is going to have a very hard time trying to read what units to bring into their drafts to cleave you. Okay, because you are playing extremely safe. You're doing everything in your, power to not show your hand and draft super, tanky. Alright, so as a cleave player who is trying to play into tank, they need to, try to figure out what DPS is the best DPS to cleave into you. And chances are, they're not going to find that answer with only 30 seconds on the clock to, find a DPS and not know what your setup is going to be. Because playing as a tank player is quite open-ended. Okay? You're quite open-ended. And because there is no fixed way of playing tank, it is very hard to decide what is good against you. Okay? That is all the pros of playing tank. What about the cons? Well, this is probably the most important one. If you decide to play tank, alright, this is one of the main cons of it. You are going to have, very long borderline boring games. Or, what we like to call bland games. Alright? Your games are going to be dragged out so long that sometimes it is going to be super boring. And this is, one of those playstyles where, if you're on Discord with your friends and stuff and you're streaming your RTA matches, tell them, go grab yourself your waifu pillow, alright? It's going to be a snooze fest. Okay? You can't guarantee anything else except it's going to be long, it's going to be boring, but chances are I'm going to win. Okay? And that is the main con of playing, tank. You need a lot of time in your hands because it's going to be a long, drawn-out fight. And that's what you are playing for anyway. Alright? The other con is that you need certain units or animuses, right, to pull it off. Okay? What do I mean by that? That means when you are playing as a tank player, your unit pool has to be quite specific, or the way you build your SR units and your SSR units has to be quite specific. Okay? What you choose to build will dictate whether you're able to play tank. So for example, for me in the beta, I didn't have Viper. And Viper was a very, very good, tank DPS pick, right? You have also units, coming down the future. You're gonna have units like Beyonce. You're gonna have units like, Veronica. Those kind of units, they are all tanky. They're all tanky playstyles, right? And you're gonna need certain animuses in order to pull this off. Okay, that is one of the cons. And now this is probably I want to argue is one of the most important thing, all right, besides it being a long drawn out fight, is that it requires very good game sense. What do I mean by this? Now, I want you to picture yourself playing as a tank player, all right? As a tank player, you are 100% guaranteed to play at least 5 to 10 minutes a game, okay? Typically speaking, it's like about 2-3 minutes as an aggro player, right? You either manage to do what you want to do or you're dead. With a tank player, that's not the case, all right? And because you're going to be playing so long into the game, you need to have very, very good game sense in terms of you need to know whose turn is it going to be, what's the percentage of the turn meter on your opponent, what are your cooldowns like, what are your shell cooldowns like, what's your opponent's shell cooldowns like, when do I rip the S3 to clutch a match, when do I click S2, when do I rate a rotation, who do I hit that will have the best impact so that this turn is nullified, all that kind of stuff. You have to be constantly thinking about it, non-stop every game you play, okay? Because if you mess up one time, okay, in the early game, sure. But as the frenzy comes on, when your healing starts going down, the damage starts ramping up, if you accidentally waste an S3 on any unit whatsoever, chances of you coming back is very slim. Okay, especially when you're playing a tank v tank match. Those matches can last like 20 minutes. I'm not even gonna lie to you. Alright? And then when you get to such a late game, alright, it becomes a war of attrition. And if you suck at playing this, attrition game, you lose. Which is why I say it requires very, very, very good game sense. Alright? Now that is the pros and cons about playing tank. Okay? Now, I can't comment on, how a tank team is usually formulated, but I can give you a framework that usually, stands true to the test of time when playing tank. Alright? So here are, some basic tank composition rules. Okay, your first and most important rule is you want to pick high value supporters that offer offensive and defensive capabilities. Okay? That is your main goal. You want to be picking, very high value supporters that offer offensive and defensive capabilities. So one that comes to mind for me right now is something like a Beyonce. Alright? She can turn meter push a unit, she can cooldown reset, she can offer attack up and crit damage buff, that kind of stuff. Because in the late game, alright, all of her skills becomes pretty unfair. When your damage starts scaling up already and then you put an attack buff and crit damage buff, one crit from your supporters can probably take out a unit, right? And so that is what you're trying to, pick most of the time. And with your DPS, all right, your DPS is extremely open-ended. And what do I mean by that? That means you are just, picking, DPSs that will just counter them. All right. So say, for example, your opponent goes pretty heavy on, choosing red units, for example. Then your DPS is just going to be a blue unit like Viper, right? Because you are trying to abuse the fact that as someone who has elemental advantage, you're going to have, more crit rate, more accuracy, and all that good stuff. And they're going to have the opposite effect on you. Okay? They pick too many AoEs. Pick the unit that, counters AoE. They pick too many single targets. Okay. And then you just pick a DPS that, can hide or stealth or void. Whatever the terminology is for that game. Okay? Then the DPS can't hit you, but you can hit them. Right? If they go, way too much CC, then you just pick a DPS that, can just shrug it off. Whether we have that or not, I don't know yet. Okay? But I'm just giving you examples. Alright? That's why your DPS is extremely open-ended, because it is not the end-all be-all that if your DPS is shit, you're dead. You're not trying to do that. You're trying to play the long-ass game here. Alright? And in a long game, even your supporters can do damage. I have to reiterate that. Okay? So that is, the very, very basic tank composition. Alright? Now, because, like I said in, the finding your playstyle video, and if you haven't watched that, check it out here. I'm going to leave it up there. Because every account is not created equal, my tank experience is going to be different from your tank experience. Okay? And because of that, you have to experiment what kind of, playstyle or, what kind of tank playstyle you want. Alright? So what I can do for you here, okay? Because, like I said, you're playing the extremely long game here, right? So my experience to your experience is gonna vary. So I can give you some general rules on, what you want to do as a tank player and what you want to look out for, okay? So I'm just gonna give you some tips and tricks, okay? Now, number one, as a general rule, okay, your job as a tank player, all right, especially in the drafting phase. So I'm just gonna write here, drafting phase. Your goal is to try to find units that stretches the game out as long as possible, all right? Stretch the game out as long as possible. Okay, that is the entire goal of you. Why? Because you are picking units with really unfair kits already, all right? And it will only get amplified in the late game when healing goes down, damage goes up. I don't know what it's called in this in Etheria, but in E7 it used to be, we call it frenzy. Okay? Now, that is what you want to do in, the drafting phase. In the ban phase, okay? In the ban phase, this is probably, a quite important rule for you to remember. Any unit or animus, all right? Any unit that looks to speed up the game equals ban. All right? So when you are trying to ban a unit in the draft, you are trying to only ban the unit that looks to speed up the game. And that is your arch enemy. Get rid of it. You do not want to deal with it. Fuck it off. All right? Why is that the case? Because as a tank player, you don't want the game to end in 1 turn. You don't want the game to end in 2 turns. You don't even want the game to end in 3, 4, 5 turns. You want the game to end when you decide it's time to end the game. Alright? You decide when the game is going to end, not your opponent. That's your entire job as a tank player. Alright? This is super important to remember. Okay? Because if they pick units that, do things along the lines of like, put up unbuffable and then defense break you and then nuke you, you're not tanking anymore. So you're trying to look for, units that will do shit like that. So like a Tsukiyomi into a Messiah also is not something that you want to see. So you want to get rid of, the thing that, speeds up the game. So for example, it could be the Tsukiyomi, it could be the Messiah. Example, all right? I'm giving you very, very simple examples here so that you understand what I'm trying to, portray or, present to you. Okay? That is the entire idea of, playing as a tank player. Your job, all right, is two things here. These are the tips and tricks, all right? The third thing I want to talk about, all right, as a tank player, okay, you have to experiment what works and what doesn't work. You have to play a lot of games. Because you need to have that insane game sense. Okay? Because you need to have that insane game sense, you have to play a lot of games. Do you have to play a lot of RTA? No. You can go and find a friend and say, hey, I want to practice some games just so I can get a game sense, some game sense. Will you help me out? We can do that. You can create your own lobby. You can have your friend go in there and then you can play with them. Okay? Indirectly, he's going to learn how to play tank. You're going to learn how to play tank. And it's a win-win. The problem is, it takes a long ass time. Alright? Your games are going to go on forever. So unless, you guys have a lot of time, this is probably going to be pretty hard to pull off. But you have to learn how to play tank. And the whole reason is because of this, alright? In an RTA season, okay, I'm just going to write it here. In an RTA season, typically when the RTA season just starts, alright, everyone wants to cleave. Everybody wants to cleave or play aggro, okay? They want that quick win, right? But as, this is, let's say, early season, okay? As the season progresses into mid-season, you start seeing a lot more standard playstyles, right? You will start seeing people play more standard, right? So you'll see people go, all right, they'll pick this, and then they'll, pick, something that's elemental advantage, or they'll pick something that, will be positive in the game state for them and negative for them. That kind of stuff, right? They'll tangle with their opponents, and that's usually in the mid-season. And as you get to the final late season, right? The late season, everyone starts bulking the fuck up. Everyone starts playing tank. All right? And the psychology behind it is because tank is so safe, number one. Number two, we understand that at the end of that RTA season, everyone is going to start rushing to, climb the ranks to get, to the top 100 so that they can get that beautiful frame. All right? They have that flex and, more rewards, whatever. And because everyone's trying to rush that, people are going to play aggro, right? The people who are trying to rush will try to play aggro because they want to play quick wins. They want quick points. Whereas the people who are already, secured themselves in the top 100 or, in the top 150, they want to just slowly progress because to get them there is not very far. And so they are going to start playing tank because number one, it kills time, right, for the opponent. Number two, the reason why I say you play so safe you can't lose is because some of the times, the people who see you're playing tank will just forfeit and go next. Because they don't have 10 minutes to waste, right? Number three, okay, because tank is annoying to cleave in. They choose the wrong DPS, you ban the right DPS, you win. Okay, and because of that, it is very, very safe, and you're guaranteed to get yourself into top 100, and that's why people want to play tank in the late season. Don't believe me? Look at the next season and you will see that trend. Because I saw that trend already when I was playing for, the beta. Everyone went cleave, 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 Marvel Kraken, Lily, Messiah, that kind of shit early game. At last day, it was just Lingluo, Viper, Sanya, Tiamat. That's it. That's all everyone wanted to play. Okay? So, these are some tips and tricks on how to play tank. I can't comment too much more than this because we don't have the game, number one. Number two, there are going to be more units, release in the future. But this is a very good framework for you guys. Alright? Watch this video a couple of times. I may have rambled on a little bit and I only do one takes, right? So try and, screenshot what is important. And eventually you're gonna get to a point where, that's why he said that. And that's hopefully what I can impart to you. Okay? Now, that's all I want to talk about. Next one, we'll have to talk about either cleave or standard. I don't know which I'm going to talk about yet. I'll let you guys decide later on when I'll make a community post. But in the meantime, you know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, and if you want to watch me live, watch me on Abstract. Besides that, catch you guys in the next one.